Good evening, everybody, and good evening to those people that joined us online. For those people that are within the chamber, just a couple of parish announcements. First of all, there's no fire alarm planned tonight, so I won't get to practice. So if the alarm does sound, it will be for real. There are exits to my right and out through the doors here and down the corridor. Can we please make sure if the alarm does sound that we use those exits? You'll be guided by people like myself, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Perkin. We're quite affable, but I suggest that you follow me because I'll be definitely at the front. I think that's it. If you'd like to ask any questions, if you press on your microphones, there's a little bar on the square box in front of you, and if you press the button to the left, I'll be able to hear you speak, and if you turn, so there we go. So the purpose of this evening's meeting really was just to try and get a toe in the water feel for really it's about residents, because you're the people at the end of the day that will be on the back end of all of this stuff that's coming down the line from Westminster, and it's to give you a bit of a flavour for what local government reform is and what it isn't, how it might not look. As we go through, there'll be questions, so if you get any questions, if you could just hold it to the end. I've got Larissa's going to do a bit of a presentation for us here, just to bring some colour to that. But then as we get to the Q&A bit, at the conclusion of it, please feel free to contribute. And I don't want to be the headmaster because I think that's a little bit sad, but if you could just gently raise your hand and acknowledge you, and we can take you in order. So, and please, there are no silly questions. You're amongst friends. That's what we're doing this for this evening. We do want your feedback, honestly and openly. As I say, and this is only a start. We're going out to parish councils again, giving them the opportunity to feed back into us, and holding other forums. I've asked Larissa in recent times to go out to area committees and do a presentation and speak to them about, what it is, what's going to look like for us. So without further ado, I'll introduce her fresh from flying along the M25, our Chief Executive, Larissa Reid.
Thank you very much, Leader. Devolution and local government reform. It's something that kind of cannot mean very much, but can mean an awful lot. And up and down the country, there are councils like us that are grappling to come to terms with what does it mean for us. And I think the purpose of this meeting, as the Leader has said, is the Leader was very keen that and also our group leaders, that whatever went into our submission had something of our place in it, of our people. So I'm afraid it's not a presentation where you can sit. There's work that I'm going to ask you to do. There's questions that I want you to think about and try and answer as to kind of what your views are. And two people can have completely opposing views that can be absolutely valid views. So there isn't any wrong answers, but we've got to this point without really understanding what our residents and what people of Swale think. So this is our opportunity. So very briefly, next slide please, Lorraine. Very briefly, in December, the government published its white paper on the subject of devolution. And in it said it wants to create new councils which have got about 500,000 residents each. So if you think of Swale, we've got 160,000 residents. In Kent, there are 1.9 million residents. So they said approximately 500,000. Now, since that time, we've heard some people say, oh, well, it could be 400.
I'll just interject for a second, Lucy, if I may. I'm sorry, you were in full flow there. We're unable to project the presentation onto that screen. So if you look at the screens around the sides of the chamber there and get yourself into a position to do so, that'd be just helpful for you, I think, to...
Yeah, if you can see it. If not, then...
we've got the one at the front.
So
council.
160,000 is Swale, 1.9 million is Kent. And although they've said 500,000, we've heard that it could be anything from 390,000 up to 700,000. So the paper, so if we go on what's written down, it's 500,000. And all of the Kent leaders, so the leaders of all the councils in Kent, have been kind of working together to say, how would this work? And we really hadn't, there's not been any kind of standout, oh, that's very simple. You draw a line here and you draw a line here and everyone will be happy. There isn't an option that we know that everyone will be happy. What we do know is that the leaders of Kent think one council for Kent is a bad idea. So just having Kent Council for everything isn't a good idea. We also know that members have said, councillors said 2 councils, not great either, too big. Where councillors are sort of in the 3 and 4 areas, but at the moment, so things could look different. Next slide. But the first thing is, what is a unitary council? And if you think, so on the left, you've got KCC, and that's the sort of things that KCC do. So education, libraries, it's called a HWRC, Household Waste Recycling Centre, also known to most of us as the TIP. Roads, transport, adult social care, children's care, including special educational needs, home to school transport. They do some sorts of planning, economic development, youth services. They do other things as well, but that's a flavour. We do things like waste collection, so they dispose of it, we collect it. Parks and children's play areas, we do noise nuisance, planning, environmental health, housing and homelessness, including temporary accommodation, private sector housing, economic development, regeneration, revenues and benefits, community safety. We also do things like trees and customer services and revenues and benefits. There's lots and lots of things that we do. Put all that together and what you get is a unitary council. So the unitary council, in simplest terms, takes everything that the county does and everything we do and puts it together in one council. Now, there are some benefits to that, in that if you come to this chamber for meetings, often you'll hear borough councillors say things like flipping KCC, or words to that effect. When KCC does something that affects our area and our councillors wouldn't have done it like that, we can't do anything about it. So having the one area is a good idea. The bad idea is, if you look at what percentage of the money that KCC get, they spend on things like adult social care, it's lots. And actually, there is a worry that in the event that we join together, all of our money will go on providing adult social care and children's services. And actually, that's the downside. So there isn't this is a great idea or this is a terrible idea. For some things, it's good. For other things, it's not. So the question is, this is your first kind of audience participation, and I look really silly if nobody answers any questions. And those of you that are online, if you put your hand up if you want to answer the question, or write your answers in the chat, that would be great. So what do you see as the benefits of forming a new unitary council? What do you see as the problems? And what services for you are the most important that we either make sure that we retain or we enhance, we put more money to it? So that's your kind of starter for 10. Come on, I've driven 3 hours for this.
I've been quite concerned about our younger generations and what there is for them to be able to do. They're ending up getting themselves into trouble and stuff because there's no amenities and things for them to go to. I don't know if there's anywhere on the island. I don't even think the Sheerness one's open anymore. I think that's a massive thing, especially with the changes of the law. When I was that age, I was able to work. I had part-time jobs and things. So they haven't even got that ability because they're not allowed to work until they're 16 because of the insurances and stuff. So not having anything else for them to do as well brings further problems. They're bored and then they start being destructive. And I know there's no excuse for it, but I think something needs to be addressed for it massively. That's in my personal opinion.
Yeah, so can I ask if you're suggesting that a unitary authority might be able to deliver that better for us?
Yeah, I think in some way that there should be something so there's more for them to do. At the end of the day, our younger generations are our future as well. And they need some good guidance. I really do believe that needs to be looked into.
Thank you. Dolly.
Sorry, I was late. So from a town and parish perspective, I've got a real concern that the unitary councils won't be very specific on real community assets. So kind of comes down to your point as well, that I'm worried about our football pitches, I'm worried about our little areas that communities really, really value. And some of those will be able to be passed to town and parish, but that brings me back down to the other worry that I've got, is that people will be still paying the same amount of council tax, and towns and parishes will be expected to pick up the running of these community assets or will lose them. So where is that extra funding for towns and parishes going to come from? Otherwise, it will look like we don't care, and that's not true, because we do care, but there is only one pot of money, and residents really need to have that value for money in upper level council tax as well as lower level council tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've got the same point of view as Dolly, but from the opposite side. I see it as a real opportunity for town and parish councils. I see it as a massive opportunity for more devolved power to go down to local people, to actually see more local assets being retained by town and parish councils, and actually people on the ground who understand the needs of what local people need being retained in those towns and those areas.
Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, one concern I have about unitary authorities is that it will become too vast, whereby now, you've got your local ward councillors where, your ward members, your residents know who you are. I think that is a disadvantage. But then the advantage of it is basically to have a lot more services under the same umbrella, whereby now it's split. I mean, I'm going to come down to the local Swarborough Council. We've got a stupid situation in my view at the moment. We've got it in Milton, where basically, I'll take the grass cutting for instance in the summer. I see Councillor Martin nodding there. One side of the road basically is cut by KCC and the other is by Swale. And it doesn't correspond at all whatsoever. That is one example. So, without going on too much about it, that is an advantage, and other services coming in-house. But as I said when I just started, that I do fear that it could be remote. Getting back to the parish council issue, that's possibly, I use the word possibly, where perhaps parish councils would come in handy to localise it. But
Thank you. I'll send a carrier pigeon across to you then, Ashley.
Thank you. Actually, Tony stole one of my examples of one of the benefits, which is there are, in an era where councils contract out services a lot more, or had done over the last 20 years, you have shared responsibilities, and they are often the two tiers using the same contractors for different contracts to do the same thing, just in different parts, and that's clearly is an inefficiency in the system. But I think going back to the point about accountability is probably where I lean in seeing the advantage here, because I think, there's KCC elections coming up, for example, or when people get the council tax bill come through, they see the headline figure and it's the districts that everyone apportions accountability towards. And I think there is a whole tier above that, and the elected representatives elected to KCC, who are not particularly visible unless they really do work at it. And there are examples of that, of course there are. But I just think the accountability side of the greater share of council tax, 73% of it, a lot of people do not apportion the accountability accordingly. And I think that's because it's covering such a vast area, actually. So there are obviously understandable concerns about a unitary and what that might mean for people who are identify of their district locality. But equally, it shows that there's an issue that we have at the moment with the upper tier county council, and that, you know, you have an area that's covering, you know, right the way up from Dartford and Sevenoaks down to Hythe and Margate. And I think, going back to this lady's point here, that's where the allocation of funding and the provision of services for things like young people might get, it becomes more difficult, arguably, to sort of ensure that the localities have the sort of things that they want for their local area, and the accountability for that becomes quite difficult under the current system.
Thank you, Richard.
Sorry, just to stress, there are quite a lot of youth services about. Normally they're run by other organisations, the Scouts, the Air Cadets and things like that. Ray Featherstone still exists on the Isle of Sheppey, and I can't remember what evening he does meet. So there's a lot of things that do go on, but I have the same concern as you, that the youth services have been poorly funded and we are letting down our future generation. I think you're right. One of the benefits I see is it's absolutely confusing sometimes to know which organisation to contact. And it's hard even when you're in the system, so it must be even harder when you're not used to a system, because streetlights, it could be a housing association, it could be the parish council, it could be KCC, it could be Swale. So it gets confusing. Fly tipping, well, if it blocks the road, it's KCC. If it doesn't block the road, it's Swale. It's absolutely confusing. So it tidies it up. My worry is, if it's too large, it could be a disadvantage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask if there's anybody online who wants to make a comment.
Somebody said, I agree with Dolly. I'm concerned about services going to town councils when the staff don't have the expertise.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's right to look at reform of local government, but I think this is the wrong answer. I think it's too large, and these unitary councils will be too big and remote. I can see they're after the benefits of the economic scale. Fulton looked at this in the past, and they tried the county borough councils, which didn't work. I believe in the 3 tiers of local government. It's just the way they're operated, and we should stick to that.
Okay. Sadly, that's one thing that I guess we're not going to get the option to do. So
no, but it's a question of democracy. We're losing a lot of democracy, and I feel with this.
I hear you loud and clear.
Large councils. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Is that going to work or not? Can you hear me? Okay, I've just been listening to the points. I suppose, the issues in terms of potential benefits. Economies of scale, I can see the benefit of a one-stop shop. I can see the benefit of pooling expertise on contracting out and so on. I can see the benefits of easier control for central government, because you've got fewer organisations to deal with, which I suspect is what Sir Humphrey would like to see. And I can see a role for cutting out some of the overlaps on things like, say, economic development. That's and to give an idea of scale, roughly speaking, what they're saying, I suppose, will be an organisation that covers roughly 3 times the population of Swell does now. So it's 3 times bigger area. And that points me to, therefore, the downsides. It's going to be much more remote. I think there's an issue about how it aligns with NHS health services, which I think is a key issue. There's the role of parish councils. I see this as being potentially bad news, because there'll be assuming there's no reorganisation of parish councils, there'll be a lot more of them, and there'll be a lot, and basically they won't get heard about. It's a bit of a struggle with Swell now, frankly. And the other thing is, clearly, you mentioned the real possibility of just asset stripping, because adult social care and other areas will just drive the budget and there'll be nothing left over. And so my own concern is that's what's really behind it. That's so far my list. But anyway.
Thank you. Really helpful. Mr. Sheerness this evening.
Yeah, thank you. I can see the benefits of a unitary in certain areas, but what worries me more than anything is being like an islander, the size of a unitary council, things that are important to people like me on the island won't be important to the rest of the unitary authority, and they'll get sidelined. So I'd like to see how it's going to work with, things. I mean, for instance, seashells on the island. Kent County Council were looking to defund it. The rest of the councillors, it didn't affect them, but obviously it's a very important thing for the island. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of other projects that we see as important to the development of the island, but the rest of a larger unitary authority is not going to consider important. And I think that needs to be considered.
Thank you. Ben, I'll come back to you in a second.
So certainly in terms of the benefits, I think the economies of scale argument falls down as soon as you start looking at some of the councils that have already had this imposed upon them or that have already volunteered to have it. There was no saving for the South-West, for Cornwall or for Somerset when they went to county to a unitary. Where there is potential, I suppose, is if you were to turn around and say it's going to open up an awful lot of brownfield sites. All the old council offices available for development. That's about the only one that I've come up with so far as being a potential positive. There is the risk of asset stripping, and bearing in mind that, let's just take what we've got within the parlour there. You have sitting on a Milton Regis district council items. Well, where are they going to end up? You've got items that belong to the old Sheppey Rural Council. Where will they end up? They could end up in parts of the county that have no identity with those. Faversham's fairly lucky in that most of their material still sits in Faversham. I think you're looking
Can we have your Magna Carta?
Can't have that. It's everyone's Magna Carta. But also, when you start looking at the potential democratic deficit, we know that you're likely to have much larger areas. It may well be, I think fairly commonly it's been a case of where you have one county councillor, you double it and get rid of all the current district ones. Well, that's two individuals dealing with around 10,000 houses rather than one dealing with 10,000 and 7 or 8 around them assisting with that. So at this point, you become very remote, and actually who will know their local councillor. I think it dissuades others, particularly those in minority groups, from taking part in the process. Let's face it. Let's say for argument's sake, it's North Kent that we get. Is somebody with children as the primary caregiver going to travel from Faversham all the way to Dartford for a meeting every night of the week? It's not going to work. And I know that's an extreme one to look at, or down to Hythe, if it goes the other way. You just don't know. So I think it does pose real questions on the democratic side. And let's face it, it's a struggle now to get members of the public to come here to ask questions at a full council or at a planning committee, unless it's something really, really tasty. Imagine what it'd be like if you've got to go 2 hours on public transport rather than half an hour. I think it is a real struggle there. In terms of the services, we all want to see an improvement to youth services. I personally would like to see an improvement to the amount of affordable housing that can be delivered, and all sorts of other areas, but realistically that's not going to come with this, because the funds are going to be eaten up with, certainly in the first few years, redundancy pay for existing officers, no doubt, and we mustn't forget that they are real people that are working really hard across the board, regardless of which council they're in. That they're their futures. You will lose those councillors who know the area, and you may well find that decisions don't really reflect the local populace. I'm sure everybody behind me would say, there's things that have gone through and been given planning permission here that if it was decided at the parish level wouldn't have been. And I'm sure there's things that have been made at higher levels than us, so the mineral stuff from KCC, or the where you're going to put a tip from KCC that we've disagreed with, that's gone through, or when the planning inspectorate gets it. The more remote it is, the less likely you are to really get a decision that matches with what the public want.
Thanks, Ben. On the councillor numbers, it's almost as though you've read Larissa's presentation, because she does raise that one of her slides later on, without stealing your thunder. No, I'm just saying it's almost what you had.
Telepathy, Ben.
I've got Hannah, then Dolly, and I'll do things.
Thank you. So in terms of what I see the benefits of forming a unitary council, I mean, I tend to agree with the people that say we should be having them, but there we go, we are having them. So I think that there is the opportunity potentially to do things properly that are currently failing at Kent County Council. As an example, home to school transport, they have been panned for their delivery of that. SEND provision for children across Kent is incredibly poor, and as a unitary, we would potentially have a chance to look at how we would do that differently and provide it in a more effective way. I agree with others when there's discussion around how planning needs to be. There needs to be a different view on planning, because we're not getting the housing that we actually need. We're just getting the housing that the market needs. The downsides, the problems of unitaries are that actually this feels a bit like shuffling the deck chairs in the Titanic. I think there's no money now, so reapportioning money, there's still no money to pay for things. So without actually having a properly funded local government, then it doesn't matter what it looks like, it's still not going to function in a way that actually helps residents and doesn't provide things. Like, there's no point having 3, 4, 5 unitaries if all they can do is provide the services that they're legally required to provide. That might as well go into the civil service. And then what services are most important to you? I mean, as a councillor, I hear from lots of people about very different priorities on what they think is really important. But I suppose my overall view is that the thing that matters most to me is making sure that our most vulnerable residents are properly cared for. So our young people, our elderly people, people that have special educational needs, people with disabilities. And those people have to be the people that we think about first whenever we make any decisions about anything. And I think that, moving to unitary councils, we know that local government is the kind of, it's the backstop to stopping these people from getting into just really awful situations a lot of the time, and how we manage to transfer services so that it's still there as a sustainable model to be able to protect those people from kind of falling off a cliff edge is really important. And I think actually there's not enough money at the moment to be able to do that properly in a kind of sustainable way. We know that there is, this kind of year on year of whether or not we're going to get household support funding. My hope is that if we go to a unitary council, then there's discussion about how we fund that long term, and there's a long term vision of how we look after the most vulnerable people that live in whatever the unitary looks like. I don't hold a lot of hope at the moment, but I think it's important to just keep banging the drum for residents, because it's not just about us as politicians, it's very much about their services.
Thank you. Dolly.
Thank you. The first time I spoke from my chair of town council hat on, but I'm going to raise 2 positives as a swell councillor. And these might be a bit controversial, but at the moment the system is from what I've been following, that county councillors can pick and choose vanity projects to pick up and put down when they feel like it. And that to me is disgusting. I'm looking forward to, if this goes through, that there's the opportunity to rejig the system where they will fight just as hard for a old people's home, for assisted living accommodation, for community wardens, as they do for a seashell centre. All of those services were absolutely integral to the way that Sheppey runs its community. 75% of those have been removed with hardly any bat of an eyelid, whereas one of them, quite rightly, has had a lot of effort from county councillors, and that really cannot be the way forward. And the other issue, which is far more fundamental and has irked me since the moment I've actually been elected, is that councillors in general appear to be able to do whatever they like, from being convicted to having really quite poor behaviour in their outside lives, and then are able to represent communities. And that is a very fundamental flaw, in that A, we have to have really arbitrary rules to remove these people, and that I don't think is right, and that access to the system at KCC is fundamentally flawed for engagement of residents. For example, planning here, you can go and look on Mid-Kent Planning Portal and you can see every document that's attached to a planning application. KCC do not run that system. You cannot see responses to planning applications, and fundamentally those planning applications that arrive at KCC have actually a bigger effect than housing on some levels, and it's incredibly difficult for anybody to have any engagement now, and that is a system that needs to go. Any level of local government should be transparent, people should be held accountable, and people should be absolutely sticking to the Nolan principles, which for me, as a mum that came to being elected by my community, I've been absolutely saddened to be raising issues that I can do nothing about when it comes to the people that sit next to me, the people that say they represent communities, but yet display behaviour that 99% of our community finds absolutely abhorrent. So I think that is an opportunity that we can do things differently, and that communities should feel engaged, and they should be able to feel that the people who represent them are actually the right people to represent them from just a general decency level, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm new to this, so I don't really know an awful lot about it, but I'm going to take more interest now. What concerns me, the numbers you give. Do we only get 2 councillors to cover for 500? How does the numbers work? That's what I'm interested in.
So we don't know entirely yet, because that's something, it won't be 2. At the moment, we have 47 that cover Swale, and then we have... How many that cover Kent? 87, 86? Yeah, so 87 that cover the whole of Kent. Now, what's likely to happen is... Pardon?
I can hear you.
Sorry, okay, yeah, but the people on the thing. So at the moment, we've got 47, and it sounds like I knew the answer all along for the people on the line. We've got 47 that do Swale, and we've got about 80-something that does Kent. So what's likely to happen is we won't get as many as 3. Let's say we have 3 councils joined together. We won't get as many as 3 times the number of councillors, but we will get more than just 2 or 47. So there's a big question about how many electors to one councillor should there be. And that's one of the pieces of work that we would have to propose to government to say, we think there's something called the Local Government Boundary Review, and when we know the geography of what this unitary will look like. We will put a proposal forward to, let's say we think we should have 100 councillors for that area. They will look at that and they will look at the sort of jobs that the councillors have got to do and the decisions they've got to make, and they will come back and either say, yep, that makes sense, or actually we think you need more than that, or actually we don't think you need as many as that. But there will still be, there won't be as many as we've got now, but there you will still have a ward councillor that you know who it is. It just might be that your ward councillor is also other people's ward councillor as well.
Yeah, it just concerns me about the ratio of councillors to the amount of people. You're all pushing all these extra housing and everything else. So will the councillors go up for a certain area that's relevant to the amount of extra housing, extra stuff we have going on?
Yeah, so we will still try when we get to that point in the process, we will still try to make sure that the councillors the council areas are done by size, numbers of residents rather than by size. So let's say you've got 5,000 residents in one place, but it's quite an urban place, and then you've got a big area that's got 5,000. What we do is we make an assessment to say, actually, is that big area okay just to have one council, or is it too big even though it's 5,000 people? And is the small area, actually it's 5,000 people, but is that, is it right? So we look at each individual area, but also when we do that, we ask you what you think, because what we do is we say, well, when you're doing this, so let's say you've got 2 areas, and what we were going to do is put a line down the middle to split it up for different wards. Now, on paper, on a map, that might look like a great idea, because it cuts a field in half and it's fine. But in reality, the residents might say, but that's the field that brings our community together. That's the most important field in our... So actually, we need this, we accept it's bigger, but we need one area to be our ward. And that's the piece of work that we've got to do. And until we know what the geography is, we are not going to have a situation, let's say that we have a council, and in a minute I'm going to go through some maps of possible options, but let's say we had a council that was Swale and Canterbury and Thanet, so kind of a long thin one like that. We wouldn't just say, right, we're going to have one councillor for Sittingbourne, one councillor for Faversham, one councillor for Canterbury, one for Whitstable, one for Margate, one for Broadstairs, one for Ramsgate. We wouldn't do that. We would probably have, in that situation, kind of close to kind of 70, 80 councillors for that level. But that piece of work is a bit mathematical, but it's also a bit... it's a bit of a science, but it's also an art, because it is about a bridge that cuts 2 communities actually might be a really good place to put a boundary, because nobody crosses that bridge and they look that way and we look that way. Or that bridge could be the thing that's in the middle of that community. And that's the piece of work we've got to do.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come to you in a second.
You say what are the benefits? On a personal level, I can't see any benefits in doing that. To be honest, we don't get a lot now, but if it gets even bigger, we're going to get even less. And it's at least this way, you can get to see people or speak to people. And I'm not a dinosaur, but I don't want to keep going on ruddy line. I did that for 50 years. I do not want it in retirement. Doesn't mean to say I can't do it. I choose not to. And that is my choice. But what are you going to do if they go that way, to say everything's online? and you can't talk to anyone, and no, I'm not a robot, and I do want to talk to somebody, where do you go? Because I've made that path through trying to get something done that took 7 years, and yes, we are starting, and if it don't work, I'll start on another 7 years to get it finished. But there isn't the facilities, and they just assume you're all going to do it their way. Well, I believe it's us that form the communities. You should at least come and ask them. I didn't know much about this. In fact, I didn't know about this meeting. And it's not that I don't take any interest, I just hadn't picked up on that. So you're going to have more open communication when there's, well, I hope so, because if you don't see me, you mean I haven't seen it. But it's people like me that get involved with these sort of things, or things they feel passionate about. I don't usually bother people unless it goes wrong, and something's wrong if half the community didn't know about it. But I don't think it's going to work. It's going to be too big.
We do have quite a number of the community that don't realise we're different councils from KCC. It is a problem. A lot of people, and I apologise to all the councillors, a lot of people don't know who their councillor is, don't care who their councillor is, because nothing's gone wrong, so they don't need their councillor. And actually, that is a big problem with this piece of work, is that a lot of residents don't realise, it's that, as Councillor Wise said, they think their council tax, they pay £2,000 a year to have their bins collected, and that's what they pay their money for. And they don't realise that actually out of that £2,000 a year, kind of £180 is us, or, you know, it's not that much. People don't know that. People don't realise. We get people complain to us about swale heating because they hear swale and they think swale heating's us. And they don't know about KCC. And that's not, people aren't wrong. People are busy. They have, you know, lives, and it's sometimes very, very difficult. So it's not surprising that people aren't engaging. But what we will be doing is, it's very difficult because people want answers, and we haven't got answers to give people, and that's really difficult. So as the answers come, or certainly the questions are more crystallised, we'll be doing a lot of different type of engagement. But the area committees are very well advertised, and we still don't get very many people that come to them. And they're online and they're face-to-face at the same time, and they're advertised in print, social media, all over the place, but we still don't get very many people come. And it's a real problem that we want to address, but short of dragging people out of their houses, which is frowned upon, if we go and do that, there's not a lot, you know, it's difficult. But I understand what you're saying, because this is big.
Yeah,
okay, thank you. So I just want to, in terms of how we progress now, councillors, you'll get your opportunity next week when we have our meeting. So I want to hear as much as I can from our residents, frankly. So I'll bring them forward first, and then I'll come on to the councillors afterwards, because I've got more to. Did you want to?
If I may come back on one thing, which was, in fact, it's emerging in the discussion. Really, it comes down to the boundary decisions, doesn't it? One of the things I wanted to mention was, I suppose, was the issue of cutting across local communities, and bearing in mind that the current boundaries date back to 1974, when various committees were put together at that stage. We're now talking about putting communities that are even bigger together, and where those lines are drawn. So I'd be very interested to see what the possibilities are, and whether you're thinking just it's the current, like say, swale with Canterbury and so on, or whether actually whether you go below that and start the unpalatable ideas about, for swale anyway, about unpacking some.
Hold that thought.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a very basic question. At what stage is the legislation on this at the moment? Has it been passed, all of this? Because
When you say legislation,
well, because it sounded
Yeah, no.
saying about the numbers and the councils.
There is no legislation at the moment.
Well, that's what I thought. Because
There
they
is-
must be getting
there is a-
information for a green paper.
There is a government white paper that's been published in. There isn't currently any legislation that has gone through Parliament. It is going to go through Parliament. What the government have said is that at the moment, all they want are that we've all been invited to do it. Invited to do it. Technically and legally, we don't have to. The issue is, if we don't, we won't be able to. The chances are we will, once the legislation comes in, we will be told what it's going to be, and we won't be able
This is
to
a very
get involved.
hybrid approach, isn't it?
It's a fast-moving approach. The government have been very clear they want this to happen. So there's two parts to the legislation. There's the bit about mayoral combined authorities, which doesn't affect us at the moment, and then there's the bit about local government.
So it's not mandatory.
It's not mandatory. The government have said we are expecting councils to do it. It is not mandatory, but they are expecting councils to do it. And the question that we have to ask ourselves as a council is, if we don't do it, if we say no, we're not going to happen, what will happen? What will happen to our ability to...
Funding will dry up.
And we don't know whether that's... But that's kind of... All councils have just seen this as... You know, and I've just been to Hampshire, that
It's
having
a Trump
exactly the same conversations that we are. Actually, you know, it's going to be when, and if we want to have any influence, we've got to. So by the 21st of March, we've just got to put something in that's anything we've got. And I've been talking to other counties. Some people are putting in principles. Some people are putting in... But that's not... And then... But we have to put our proper what we want to do, as many iterations as there are for Kent, by the 28th of November. And that's the date we've been given as the legal date.
It's a funny thing, because it was... I mean, there wasn't much in the manifesto, and I don't know whether this was, but...
The devolution and the mayors was absolutely in the manifesto. I think 24 pages. It was in there 21 times. It was in there a lot.
Sure.
The local government reorganisation wasn't. However, to be very fair,
Not that I read it.
no,
so I
this
can't
is
complain.
about the fifth lot of local government reorganisation that I've been involved with in my career as a council officer. The last one was, I think, James Brokenshire in about 5 years ago, and everyone thought it would happen then. We really did think it would happen. And then James Brokenshire became poorly, we had a pandemic, all that other stuff happened. So
It's been on the cards.
it's not a new... It would be really wrong to say this is a new thing. It's absolutely not a new thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll come to you a minute, Jocelyn.
I want to come back to what you said with regards to getting people to be involved and having something to say. I hear a lot of people when I've spoken in the past, and I've just come along because I was interested. I saw it posted, and I've seen a lot of things that have gone on Facebook. I come back to you. A lot of people say it is what it is, when a lot of the time it is what it shouldn't be. And they feel that they don't get heard, so they sit back, they relax, and they don't bother getting up and saying something. But technology seems to be taking more and more of the human away, and it's kind of quite a big thing because it's happening in everything. Even when you go shopping, you haven't got cashiers anymore, you've got self-service checkouts. It's not just a quarter of what was checkouts. It's 3/4 of it now. So there's a lot more that technology is taking away, and with the humans, I'm saying with the humans, because I'm kind of putting them as two different things now.
You're one of us.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of people feel they don't get heard, so they sit back and they don't say anything anymore. And sometimes a little bit more empathy, understanding needs to come from the frustration of what's going on in the real life and speaking to real people, not real people, but it is. I wasn't talking, when I said about the youth, it wasn't with regards to just the island, because my first inspiration of speaking about the youth clubs and things came from when I was shopping in Gillingham with a few teenagers, and they was around the supermarkets. It wasn't a case of it's just the island, it was just because on the island they've gradually gone to none. I know you've got the scouts and you've got army cadets and the down at the Barton's Point.
Cadets.
But it's a wider society. It's the wider society, and it's not just the youths. I just brought the youths into it in this case. I think the system is failing a lot of people, and I think a lot of people need to be able to say something, but getting them out to say something when they feel they don't get heard makes it quite challenging, because it is coming from the higher ups that are putting you guys under pressure as well with things. So
Yeah, I'm going to bring Jocelyn in, then we're going to move on to the maps.
I'm just going to request, please, the leaflet that comes through, the magazine or brochure, could you put articles and progress in that? Because I only knew about tonight because I had the local paper. Sheila did. We don't do Facebook. Exactly. And going on the Swale Council site, forget it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I apologise, because one of the issues for us was about the timings and starting to get things moving as quickly as we could, to try and at least get some kind of informed response for the early March deadline. But obviously we've got until November.
Yeah.
But before you know, doing the job that you did, before we go like that, November will be here. We'll turn back round and we'll be into December and we've missed it. So we just kind of wanted to start. This is your start of a 10 to start getting some feelings from back on the ground level. I'll just bring you in, and then.
So it'd be nice to put it in the magazine.
Yeah,
and if it's such a big issue, as you say, then perhaps we should have some posters up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll bring you back, and then we're going to go over to the maps.
It can be done later. Could you at some point clarify this business between mayoral local authorities and local government reorganisation? Because I've lost the plot on that one.
Yes, we'll do it now.
It could be done later, but when...
So, no, two things. So, a mayoral combined authority, if you think about Andy Burnham up in Manchester, that's a mayoral combined authority. A mayor is a directly elected person that has powers over things like skills, employment, transport, and they get powers devolved from central government to that mayor, and that mayor can appoint, so not other elected people, a deputy that normally does things like policing. So we've got Matthew Scott, who's our Police Crime Commissioner, directly elected, and that post wouldn't be directly elected because that would be appointed. Then what happens in the majority of cases is underneath that, where you've got unitary councils, you have the leader or the leader and deputy of those unitary councils that work into the mayor to influence what the mayor does. Now, that's part of the thing about unitary councils. Under law, they have voting rights. Borough councils don't have voting rights. So in places where you've got part borough, part unitary, the borough council leaders go to the meetings, but as visitors or guests or non-voting members, they're not allowed to vote. The unitary authorities are allowed to vote. So what the government's vision is to have the mayors with the unitary authorities that are voting and help setting the agenda. And then what the government want is all of the mayors to get together to meet with government. And so it's the thing you said about fewer people. Now, the area for us to have a mayor is Kent. So we were asked to come up with what's our geography. The most simple geography, and everybody agreed it, is Kent, because you know, it's simple. So when and they have said that everybody will get a mayor, they've been very clear about that. When we get a mayor, it will be a directly elected mayor for Kent that will have the unitary unitary leaders and politicians that will have voting rights on the things like transport, which means, and the example that councillors always use is, if you don't like Stagecoach, the mayor can get rid of Stagecoach. Nobody can get rid of Stagecoach at the moment, but the mayor can. The mayor can say, actually, we want to spend more money on transport, on buses, and can work with the councils to do that. That's the power coming down from government to mayors. The positive is, at the moment, that power sits with central government and we can't do anything. The downside, of course, is that's a lot of power for one person, even if they've got councils looking. But it's how you make it work. And people talk about some places that have got mayors that have had real improvements in things like public transport because it's important for that area. Does that make sense?
It means, therefore, that the mayoral side could be imposed, sort of superimposed, brought. But once you've got the unitary authority sorted out, you can put a mayor in on top of that. You haven't got to do it the other way around. It can be done afterwards. Okay.
So, I don't want anyone to look at one map and go, oh my God, that's what it is. There is no agreement. What we've done is we are looking at options. So the options that we're looking at are either 3 or 4 unitaries. So this is the 3 unitary option. Now, what the government have said is you can't split boroughs unless you've got a really good reason to do so, and you can demonstrate that service provision will improve massively by you doing it. This option has got Swale with Medway, Gravesham, Dartford. So we're the sort of the dark blue. It's got a very large East Kent unitary and a relatively large West Kent unitary. Now, we haven't had the discussion at our full council yet about what, if any, people like, but what I hear from people is there's not a huge support for this publicly. However, we're going to ask you what you think in a minute. So that's the 3, okay? And really, if you're going 3, we've struggled to find a different way to do 3 other than that way. So the next map, please. So then you've got, this is looking at Swale as part of a kind of the coastal community. So you'll see that that's 4, and Swale sits with Canterbury and Thanet, and kind of goes up the coast. That's a possibility. It means that the Medway, the North Kent bit's smaller. West Kent stay exactly the same. And then you've got Ashford, Folkestone and Hythe and Dover. And the thinking about that is a sort of an M20 corridor thing. And also that's where a lot of things come into the country through Dover and Folkestone, and then the inland border at Sevington. So there's thinking about that could be a thing. So next one, please. We've then got what is known as the banana. It is not a banana, but anyway, and that is Swale and Ashford and Folkestone and Hythe. So that's sort of giving that sway. It puts Dover, Thanet and Canterbury together, and historically Dover, Canterbury and Thanet have always been aligned. They've always worked together, later on with Folkestone and Hythe. It keeps the West Kent one the same, and again, the North Kent is smaller. But that's quite a large council, and that's that one. And then the next one. And then this is the one that is called the Mid-Kent Authority, And this puts Ashford, Maidstone and Swale together. Now, we share a bin contract, which is good. That would work. There are some issues with that one around health. So that's a lot of different health geographies together. It keeps the Dover, Thanet, Canterbury and Folkestone and Hythe, which is an established cluster, if you like. It makes the West Kent quite small. It does. So that's another one. We did look initially, which is not on there, around splitting Faversham off from Swale and Faversham going east and everything else going north. That would fit with health boundaries. What health have said, so what the Integrated Care Partnership have said is, once we've sorted out the geography, they will look to sort out the health geography that will align. Although you can't change hospitals. Hospitals are, people go, if you live in Faversham, you either go to Ashford or you go to QEQM or Canterbury if it's something specific. However, what health also have told us is now lots of people have more choice where they go to. So, so that doesn't work with the health. So, next slide, please. So what we've got are those geographies. Now, this is what do you think? It doesn't have to be any of those geographies. What do you think from Swale, from your place, do you think we should be looking at going mid with Maidstone and Ashford? Do you think we should be looking north with Medway and Gravesham and Dartford? Do you think we should be looking at Canterbury and Thanet? Do you think that we should be going with Sevenoaks because we both begin with S and it's as good a reason as any? Do you think that we should, I think somebody who was talking to a councillor at Dover suggested they went with Calais. I'm not sure that's a good idea, but it was an idea. So what geography do you think we should do? There's a lady over there.
Do you not think it would be better doing it by population rather than geographically sort? Because obviously the numbers, when the division of the funding is going to take place, it's going to be about how many people you've got in each area. So for it to be equally...
Yes.
Let's say, would it not be done better on a population of area rather than the geographical?
So
because you've got a lot of areas that are farmland in some of them areas. A lot of it's farm and not and more villages rather than big towns and population.
So there's something called disaggregation of budgets, which basically says if you look at the Kent budget and how much money they get for each area, and then you look at who's using the services, you could have fewer people actually having, at the moment, people in West Kent could be funding people in East Kent. And when you disaggregate that down, what you find is you've got lots of people needing services and not many people paying into it. Yeah. So that's a problem. And that's a big piece of work that we've got to do. And kind of our finance director, Lisa, she is kind of ready to be tasked to work to do that piece of work because it's massive.
So it's not just population.
It isn't just, it's all of that.
What's happening in them areas as well.
But, and there is a big but, there is also about, all the thing we talked about in the first bit is about how you feel about your community. Mm-hmm. It's about where people look. It's where do people go shopping? Where do people go to school? Where do people, where do people see as their home? And we've not got it spot on in Swale because Faversham residents, some of them, and I was born in Faversham, so, I was there. My first job, my second job, my first one was in the co-op, but my first job was in McDonald's in Sittingbourne, and that's where I came. But I went to school in Faversham, and I went shopping, like on a Saturday, to Canterbury. So I kind of saw myself looking a bit Canterbury way rather than Sittingbourne way. But other people I know went to school in Sittingbourne, their friends are in Sittingbourne, and they saw themselves, they never went to Canterbury. So it's important about where you think your place looks. So if you think, actually, what do I do on my day-to-day when I leave Swale, do I leave and go to Medway? Do I go to Save Centre? Don't think it's called that anymore, but I know where it is. Do I go to Hempstead Valley? Do I go to the cinema at Chatham Dockyard? And if you do, you should be coming to the Light. I'm just telling you that. Or do I go to Canterbury? You know, do I go to Bluewater or do I go to Ashford? You know, think about that.
Around that would be what amenities that each areas have got as well.
Yeah. So is there anything that you think, when you looked at those maps and you thought, I could live with that, or no, that wouldn't work? Josh. Oh, sorry.
You're all right.
No. So sorry.
Thank you. I think, first of all, just from looking at the maps that are in front of us, when you look at a free unitary option, it doesn't work. I don't think personally. I think you need to look at 4. But I'll be honest, when I first heard about unitaries and moving forward, I was very much along the lines of look east, look towards Canterbury and things like that. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've sort of come to think about that last map we saw with the Mid-Kent, with Ashford and Maidstone. It makes a lot of sense to me because it means you don't cut constituency boundaries that we do currently. So actually Faversham and Mid-Kent would finally be in Faversham and Mid-Kent. Each of those unitary authorities would have a major accident emergency centre based within them. We'd have Ashford's, then you've got Thanet, which has got QEQM, Medway, and so on and so on. When we're looking at this, I think it's just a really sensible option. It's not the case that we don't have things in common with other areas like that, but I just think that we share common ground with those other 2 areas that are there. Looking at the other questions that are up there, just if you don't mind me going through, should every place have a local parish council or town council? I mean, I'm biased on it. I'd personally say yes. The local representatives of those on the ground, or those Swale Borough councillors, do a great job actually having those extra councillors that understand their area day in, day out. They live it, they breathe it, they live in those communities in that much more localised way. Is something that really does benefit areas. And on the last one, how should we involve residents moving forward? I'm sure we've seen Jim McMahon's letter that came to the National Association of Local Councillors recently that said that he really hopes and he expects borough councils to involve residents and involve parish and town councils with the responses that go in. So I'd hope that actually there is space for us to really work together as parish councils and borough councils to really design something that benefits the residents, with not just within our towns and parishes, but across the Swale as well.
Josh, if it helps, I'll just jump in for a second, Larissa. I can guarantee that will be the case, absolutely, for Swale, and that's not just from me as leader of the council, that's from leaders of all of the other groups. We're speaking with one voice on that. Thank you. Jocelyn?
Oh. You're on. We tend to go towards Faversham because you've got the medical area there you can walk in. There's the cinema, though we used the Light because we can walk there. But they have quite a lot of cultural things going on there. So yes, we go there and occasionally go to Canterbury because of the history.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I obviously can't comment on which unitary I prefer because I don't know enough about the areas to come to an informed decision, and obviously there are people better qualified than me. As long as the unitary works, I don't care whether we're with Faversham, Ashford, Timbuktu or whatever. I just want the unitary to work if we're going to have it.
I like that approach.
Well, as I say, I mean, I'm a layman. I don't get out to Folkestone or Faversham or whatever very often, so I don't really know enough about the area to say that should be a unitary authority. But as long as it works, I don't matter whether it's 3, 4, 5 or half a dozen. You know.
I'm not sure Timbuktu was keen.
We asked. Consultation.
Yeah. No, but you know where I'm coming from.
I do.
Issues of heart and head. I hear what you say about head. My heart, however, I'm a Faversham person, is sort of the East Kent, rather than, well, I suppose to start with, the North Kent, I do not like the sound of that at all, frankly. I think the question of the history of Faversham is that it's always tended to, historically anyway, lean towards Canterbury. You know, the history of the NHS back from 1948 was always that way. In fact, there used to be Canterbury and Thanet Health District, which included Faversham. That was then obviously reorganised about 3 reorganisations ago. I think there's an issue about social care alignment as well, that going back to sort of that arrangement. Of course, that means Swell would be chopped up and wouldn't fit with the guidelines you're saying you've been given. So I think that my head is saying that's what I would like to see. The heart would have to judge what other criteria are used.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to concur with everybody who's spoken so far. I like the idea of that M2 corridor, which includes Sittingbourne, Faversham, Canterbury. Canterbury's the best shopping area in Kent. You've got the hospital. From the point of view of demand on social services, it's probably the least demanding area, or one of the least demanding. If we go towards Medway and Dartford, it's probably quite a strain on social services that way. I think it's probably, we've got a lot of affinity with Faversham and Canterbury. I think it would, be a good idea.
Thank you. And does anybody else want to comment on any of the other questions in terms of parish councils?
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of experience with Sheerness Town Council. I go to all the meetings and I know they do an awful lot of good work. So I think most areas would benefit by having that local content. And I think somebody's already said it this evening. They know their area better. But the people know who they are because they live amongst them. So I think, it's a very beneficial thing to have a town or a parish council, and it would benefit a lot of other people as well.
Thank you.
Is there anything in the... Oh, my apologies.
I've got lots of councillors waiting.
Is there anything in the guidance about parish councils, by the way? Will there be fewer of them, or has it not got that far?
Parish councils aren't included in this. However, as it's been discussed, they are, because the government says that they would like us to talk to parishes as partners. But also, if you're devolving things down, why would you stop at boroughs? Why wouldn't you devolve more down to town and parish councils? So, and we have some real issues in our place, because some parish, like Faversham Town Council and Sheerness Town Council and Queenborough, and some of our bigger parishes could probably take on services, but we have some parish councils that have got like 200 residents and actually have people that don't want to run services. And so there is a piece of work. I'm meeting with the Kent Association of Local Councils Chief Executive next week to talk about how we're involving parishes in that piece of work meaningfully.
Thank you. So I'm just conscious we've got a few councillors now that can probably bring in before we hit that 8:30. Councillor Worcester, you were first, and then Councillor Martin, you were second, Councillor Palmer, you were third.
So again, I'm going to do another fairly unpopular thing, which is to talk about finance and actually how the money works out, because I'm incredibly concerned that when we have these discussions about boundary reviews, that we're not actually talking about various areas, their debt, how their budgets are read, how the residents engage with budgets. And I've been asking for 2 years now for a Swales budget to be written differently. One version for the auditor and one version for the residents. Hasn't happened yet. I'm mindful that it really does need to happen. KCC is the same. Now, when we look at that boundary review, we've got some very, very expensive problems that happen in Kent. One of them is social care. But one of them is also that Kent is responsible for all of the people that get off of the small boats and in our area. So when we look at that boundary review, I think it's actually more transparent to talk about it in that you've got to have a considered approach. Do you say, actually, all of those areas need to take responsibility for these issues? Or is it that you're expecting those unitary authorities to be solely responsible for the issues that happen in their area? Or what really should be happening is that do we all come together and lobby central government to say, actually, is this a unitary authority responsibility at all? But to have the boundary conversation without having the actual facts of the finances put in front of you, I'm not surprised KCC wasn't asked to be part of the pilot project, because there are massive holes there, and it's not transparent and it's not laid out for residents in the way that it should be or the way that I would have expected it to be. And to compound that by saying, actually, we look at the geography first, I would say no, we look at the debt first, and we look at what residents are going to be having to potentially stump up for ongoing, and making sure that they are fully prepared for what is coming, which could be double the council tax. It could be less council tax. I don't know, I doubt it. Let's be fair about things. They never go down, do they? But I think that's the honest conversation, so I'd like to push that element. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, please.
Yep, just to point out, we only have 2 areas that aren't parished currently. Sittingbourne and Milton Regis and Halfway. And I think Halfway is starting the process, so we're in a better position than most. And just on Dolly's point of finances, if you want to make sure that we're not taking on anyone's debt, basically you want us to partner with Dartford, Gravesham and Sevenoaks. Everyone else is in debt, and their reserves could pay off our debt.
Thank you. Richard.
I was interested about the integrated care board, because even when you're in Midway Health Authority, they're not integrated at all. And I think sometimes the trouble with this, anything that is rushed, and I think this is rushed, will finish up being a poor thing. Because there was an opportunity to say, well, we could do it and redraw the health boundaries and have health and social care brought under local authority control, certainly on certain issues. And if you can crack, because a lot of problems with social care is failed discharges. They go back into hospital. The hospital wants to discharge people, but the local authority hasn't got a care package in place. I'm on the border of Medway, of Swale. Medway Hospital quite often discharge people because they're doctors in Medway. They set a package up with Medway Council, and then on the day of discharge they realise that the person isn't in Medway, they're in Swale. So they cancel the package, but they're still sent home. It fails, the family get annoyed, and then they have to go back in. So there's a lot of waste of money in care. Yeah. And if you don't, so I think there's an opportunity, but I think it's been missed because what they're doing is it's being rushed through. There's been a lot of good input tonight, and I think one of the things we should have learned, we've been sending out messages, I've done it on Facebook and others, but there's a lot of people who might have seen that, and if it had a little thing in there, click this link and you can register your interest if you can put your email. There's a good idea about posters, and perhaps it should have, if you write in, if you don't have email, then write in and we'll put you on a database for an address. Why don't we have a devolution database? Even if people can't make these meetings, we can send them information. Thank you.
Yeah, that is doable. Ashley?
Yeah, just quickly on that point, I suppose one of the arguments back would be there is potential to devolve health responsibilities down, but they need to start with somewhere, and I think it would be a big mistake to look at devolving that down to a Kent level. I think lots of things that people have articulated well about the negatives around a unitary, things will be further away, you know, it won't be as accessible, you wouldn't be able to turn up to meetings. That is exactly the situation we have at the moment with Kent County Council. They meet in the day. If you live in Hythe, you can't get to those meetings. Now, a lot of people here can't get to those meetings. A lot of the focus has been on districts being abolished and those services seeming more remote, which I totally do understand people's concern about. But as we said, that's 9% of the council tax you pay. The lion's share of it is administered by Kent County Council, whose services are totally remote from everybody all across Kent. And so actually the unitaries could be an opportunity to make those 73% of your council tax paid services more local than they are now. That's the flip side of that. But I think one of the things really I've heard loud and clear from people, and I do share this, is it's the connection people have with their district councillor disappearing is a totally valid concern to people, because you know, you can look at the political makeup of this, but many other district councils, it's a lot more balanced, and actually in some degree in more recent cycles more immune to national swings. And I think that reflects the relationship people have established. People may vote in all sorts of different ways at a national level, but they will vote for somebody who they know works hard for them, who they have a connection with. And I think trying to preserve that as much as possible through this process is really, really, really important. But I also think looking at what options we have before us, public transport is key, because that talks to a lot of these concerns people have raised. There is no point having something really where, if we want it to develop as that unitary, a sense of place, that people have a connection to their area and to their local authority, if you can't get from one end of it to the other on public transport. And actually some of those options are quite limited in terms of public transport. That could be something that could be changed through bus travel, but if the reliance is on you getting around to that unitary by car, that is the wrong way to be looking at things, in my view. And if we really want the new powers that unitary might have over highways, over public transport, and potentially more devolution coming down in that space to mean anything, you know, powers coming from central government down to that area, then we want to be able to take good advantage of those. And if there's no real existing public transport infrastructure, you can't magic up a train line overnight. That could become a bit of a barrier to that working, in terms of people feeling that they are a part of that wider area. And again, you know, we spoke about skills being devolved down from government to localities, and you know, that's to a mayor and to the unitaries that sit below it. For that to really work, you've got to make sure there's good FE provision that exists in those localities as well. You can't just magic up an FE college. So we need to look a little bit as well about, where do people travel for their skills, where do they travel to learn, and how do they get there? So I think that all needs to be a part of the options that we look. I'm not saying that necessarily rules some in or out, but I think it's an important part, not just the obvious things like health, which might determine stuff, but actually probably to a lesser extent. Thanks.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, my view basically is, I think it's basically what Councillor Wise just said. I mean, we're linked into the Medway Health Authority at the moment. You know, it's Swale here, or this end of Swale, Sittingbourne. We got direct rail service to Medway, people to get to the hospital, etc. So on that aspect of it, I think it would be a gain to go into the Medway Unitary Authority. Just another thing I want to bring up, I think I did bring this up at the Sittingbourne Area Committee, I believe. If at the moment we're linked into the waste contract with Ashford Borough Council and Maidstone Borough Council. So if Ashford and Maidstone were no longer with us, if we went into, say, Medway Unitary Authority, how would we fit with keeping the existing waste contract? That could be a problem, could it?
So it wouldn't be. All the contracts that we have and all the contracts that whoever we pair with and all the contracts that Kent County Council have, they've all got to be resolved. So the waste contract would stay the waste contract until it's finished, because although it's a joint contract, we're all individually have got liabilities, and it would just be that, let's say that the three of us were in completely different councils, our bit of that council would do this, that, you know, would be in partnership, and we would still meet and talk to them, and, you know, there'll be no barriers or barbed wire going up. We'll still talk to people. We have shared services with Tunbridge Wells, Maidstone, Ashford, and all of those need to be resolved. And the chances are they won't be resolved on day one. And if you think then about all of the contracts that KCC have got, you know, they've got an awful lot of contracts. We've been talking to another council in Cumbria, and they've had 10,000 contracts over the whole of Cumbria that they had to deal with and sort out as part of their splitting up. They had 300 computer systems that they had to that aren't yet integrated after the first 2 years. So it is a massive piece of work. Our bin contract is probably not a problem for anybody. It will just happen because there's so many more things that is, as I say, Cumbria had one county and 6 districts, so much smaller than ours, and they had 10,000 contracts to sort out. So we're going to be busy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're heading towards 8:30. Do you have a final question?
When is day one likely to be? Of whatever comes up.
Could you ask us one on sport?
Yeah, we should have played our joker earlier on. So the government say they'd like day one to be the 1st of April 2028. I'd like to be a size 10 on the 1st of April 2028. Not sure that's going to happen either. It's possible. The ones that have happened have taken 2 years. The process, though, is really key, because each of these councils will become a legal entity, and the creation of them has to happen in Parliament. So if it's just us or Cumbria when they did it, or that's fine. But if it's everybody and there's lots of councils, you need parliamentary time for them all, while setting up mayoral combined authorities. And the view that we have is, as much as there is a bit of, from an officer perspective, I've got, you know, a couple of hundred staff that are going, what's going to happen to my job? And I care very much about how they feel. So there's a bit of me that goes, can we just get it done, please? But there is another bit of me that actually says, we're not going to get it done by 2028. So the honest answer is we don't know, and we won't know for a while, because it could get pushed back. The officials are saying, yep, 2028, but the officials are also saying now, we hope, we aim to get it done. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Minister McMahon and some of my district council colleagues, and I am going to be asking him, really, 2028, would it not be better if you think it's 2029, to tell us, so we can, because actually what we just want is some certainty, and we don't have that.
Josh, you can have the privilege of the last question.
It's not a question, it's more of a statement. I know, right?
Oh,
I know.
no, I'm not taking statements.
It's just a case of, in Swale, we're really lucky, and Swale Borough Council has some really dear assets to towns and parishes and boroughs across there. And I mean, I'll take off town council, I'll put a hop festival hat on. For example, you had the trademarks of Faversham Hop Festival. Things like that concern me, that there is an opportunity that people in Swale understand the Hop Festival and understand certain things that are really important to residents across Swale. No matter where we go to, those unitary authorities won't understand those things that are special to this borough. can we please make sure that things like that are protected, to make sure that it's actually protected for residents of Swale and it doesn't just get lost somewhere in a bin fire of a unitary authority somewhere?
Yeah, and just quickly, Josh, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because people, particularly, I can't remember when I went on holiday last, but when you do go on holiday, they'll say where you're from. I never say I'm from Swale. I say I'm from Sittingbourne. Oh, where's that? Not you normally get. That's close to Canterbury between us. Yeah, absolutely. But you see, so it's people's, I'm from Faversham. I'm from Sheppey. Sheppey, where's that? Sheerness, Minster, Leicester. So it's kind of that identity, and we still, desperate that we don't lose that, because it's what matters to people.
I'm surprised when you're at Laidstown that we don't know where Sittingbourne is.
Isn't it strange?
Culture as well, Lee, but I think that word culture is really important because other places have their cultures protected. So, for example, in Cornwall, you cannot produce a Cornish pasty outside of Cornwall.
That's amazing, Dolly, because you can get Yorkshire puddings in Kent. How does that work?
It's really that culture is protected. It's protected in schools. We should have the same level of protection that we can influence on this discussion.
The only other thing I would say is we are not orphans that are being adopted. It's not that there is some entity and we're going to have to join and make sure that we wash our hands and wipe our feet. It is going to be we're starting a new family, and we've got as much, all the other councils. Whitstable Oyster Festival will be saying, what about Whitstable Oyster Festival? The Dickens Festival in Medway will be going, what about that? Actually, we know about those things. We're not joining with East Lindsey Council or Hull that have never heard of it. There isn't anyone in Kent that doesn't know. There might be some people that don't know about Hop Festival, but most people do. It is still, and we will have directly elected councillors who will be fighting for that. And I don't want Swale to think that we are in some way that we're going to get ignored because we're not as good. We've got excellent councillors, amazing officers, and actually we just need to get ourselves organised to put what we want forward and to protect our place. And our place isn't Swale. Our place is Rodmersham and Selling and Faversham and Laysdown and Minster and all the places and Twiddle and that's not our place, that's somebody else's place, or Tunstall, but all the places that people think is important. Let's get together and let's have a plan for those places.
Only remains me to thank you all very much for your time, and it's time is precious. I'm just conscious that I rob you of that, but equally I do in a really genuine, sincere way, as I say, and so do all the leaders of all the groups on this council. Want to make sure that you're included in this process. So thanks to the people online too. Safe trip back to your lounge, your bedrooms, wherever you're going, and for those that are in physical attendance, safe trip back to your homes and families. Thank you very much.